Hey, don't forget your brush!
Hello and welcome back to part 2 of our Swallows Arriving watercolour project. In this part we're going to learn how to paint it. So you're going to need your watercolour paints, your paint brushes, and if you bought your kit from Artshed you'll have some little pots with some paint powder in it. That's called Brusho and you'll find I use it quite a lot in this project. Just remember that you only need a tiny bit of powder to mix with the water to get a lot of colour. If you don't have Brusho, you can mix your colours up with normal watercolour paints and that's absolutely fine. So get your things together and let's get started. So I've got my drawing here and it's not outlined in Sharpie or pen. I'm going to do that at the end. So I'm going to have a look at the original one here. Now when you do a watercolour, you never do two the same. So I'm just going to start by doing this background behind the flowers, and I've got to remind myself that I love this one, but the one I'm about to do is not going to look the same because all the colours will move in different directions this time. So I started with a pale yellow at the bottom, then I added a bit of orangey colour, and then I went up to the green. And so I've got my paint ready. So I've mixed up my yellow Brusho, then I had my yellow Brusho here, but I also added to that some of the orange from my watercolour set. And then with Brusho I have a dark green and a light green. So all my colours are ready to go for that bit, and that's quite important because we're going to paint this bit all in one go. So using my pale yellow, I'm going to start from the bottom and I'm going to work my way up. Now you don't want your yellow to be super bright. If it's really bright, just add a bit more water because we want to make sure we can paint on top of this later on with the other colours for your flowers. Now for this next bit, I'm going to put some just plain water on all this area first. So I'm just going to give my brush a bit of a rinse. And with plain water, I'm going to start painting my hills because when I get up here, I want all the colours to start mixing. And if you paint with water first, that's really going to help. So you can do that quite quickly. Just careful not to scrub over your pencil lines, and don't go into the sky. This is called wet in wet, where you put wet paint on wet paper. Now careful here, because you don't really want it to go on your bird. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my yellow here, a bit more water, and I'm going to start putting a bit more yellow on. And this time you'll see how it moves slightly differently. And then I'm going to add a little bit now of my slightly darker orange. Now this time I can just kind of go crisscross like this, because I want it to mix a bit with the yellow. Don't be tempted to scrub and scrub. Don't be tempted to do this. We want to see what the paint does on its own. So I'm just putting it in patches here. Might get a bit more on my yellow and stick it down here a bit more. So you see how it starts travelling around, and that's what we want it to do. We want it to sort of might just stick a bit more here. And then I'm going to move on to my green. Okay, so that's my yellow and my orange. It's still all moving around. And now I'm going to move on to my green, my light green. Providing you've got water on your paper, it will all start moving around. So what you can see, it's all kind of gathering in the bits where your paper has started to buckle. And that's quite normal, but what you can do is you can gently pick your piece of paper up and you can move it around. And then it can be quite fun to see where all the paint is going. I quite like it about that much, so I'm going to put it back down again. And I'm going to put in my dark green at the top of my hills. Just, again, I'm kind of just dabbing it in and letting it mix on its own in patches. So at this point, I really don't know what this is going to look like, really. You'll only know when it's dry. I might pick that up again and move that around and see what happens. Hills are quite smooth, so I quite like the smooth, the way the paint is kind of all going in a smooth line. And then you can also tip it this way. And you can tip it that way. Just move it around. So I think I might leave mine now. I quite like the little white bits that I've left. Again, if I don't like those at the end, I can paint them back in. So we're going to have to let that dry, particularly when we come to put the flowers on. This is why I didn't put a lot of water on this bit, just because we want this bit to dry as quickly as possible, because then we can paint the flowers. So have a break and we'll come back and we will do the sky. So my green and my yellows are all totally dry now, and I'm going to start on the sky. So let's have a look again at the picture that we're doing. You'll notice in my sky I've got some clouds. Now there are lots of different ways of doing clouds, but what I'm going to do for this demonstration is I've actually very lightly with pencil, I have put in some clouds. Now you probably can't see that, so what I've done here on a piece of paper is just shown you roughly the shape of a cloud. So you've got that kind of puffy shape on top, and usually it's a bit flatter on the bottom. And that shape might be higher up in your sky, and then this shape, which is just a little bit flatter, would be further down. So this sort of shape would be higher up, and this sort of shape would be further down. So if you want to spend some time very, very lightly with pencil, just put those in, because we'd quite like to rub that pencil out later, or really, we don't really want to see it, but just for the demonstration, I'm going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paint those clouds with water. So you're going to need to make sure that you have a nice clean brush. And what I've got ready, not just that, but I've also got my sky colour ready. So you can see it here. That's my turquoise brusho. If you don't have brusho, just you'll need to make a turquoise colour out of what you've got. You need to make quite a lot of it. You don't want to run out halfway through. That will be really annoying. Now the other thing we have to be careful of is that we don't really want to paint our birds, but the good thing is our birds are going to be blue later on, so it's not going to be a disaster if you get some sky on your birds. So with some water, I'm going to paint where I've put my clouds. Okay, so my clouds are nice and damp now, and you'll get why I've done that in a minute. So now I'm going to change my brush. I think I'm going to use this flat brush here to put my blue sky in. So I think I might start over here on this corner, and I'm also going to have a piece of tissue ready just in case I have any disasters. So here we go. So I've got to paint quite carefully around my birds. Now I've hit a cloud here, so let's see what it's going to do. So it's quite nice because it's going to start, I'm not going to paint my cloud, I'm going to leave it white, but I'm going to let the paint do its own thing, and then if I don't like what it's doing, I'll dab some with a tissue. So there's my cloud. I can tell I've hit my cloud because it's kind of going furry at the edges. And that's kind of what we want for a cloud, because clouds are all puffy. So I was lucky enough not to have any disasters there. I didn't need to use my tissue. So you can see that when I got to my clouds, I knew when I'd got to my clouds because it all started going furry around the edges, and I really like that because I just like that effect. So good luck with yours. I don't really need to let that dry because I can get on with painting these flowers now, because these are nice and dry, and you can paint these any colour you like. So now whatever you've designed down here, you can fill in with lots of different colours. now to paint our birds. My sky is completely dry. That's quite important at this point because you don't want your birds to kind of start mixing with the sky. So check that first, and if it's not dry, just wait till it's dry. It's worth waiting. So you're going to mix yourself up a blue. I think I'm going to use a mixture of these two here in my watercolour set. And you're going to paint the blue parts of your bird. Now your birds will be different to mine, so you'll have to check which parts are blue. So the top of their bodies, if you remember, their backs and the tops of their bodies have that lovely blue colour, but underneath they have this sort of pale colour. So this one, you can tell that that's the underneath and that's the top. So double check yours and you can just start painting them. Make a nice puddle in whatever colour you're going to choose. And then you can fill your bird in. Now swallows have lots of different colours on them, but I'm keeping it simple. That's the nice thing about art. It doesn't have to be completely realistic. I just love this colour blue. And swallows are another exciting sign of spring because they all arrive because it's got warmer. So I've painted my birds with the blue colour. I'm going to let that dry before I do the other two colours. We've got bright red for their faces and then some pale, sort of pale creamy colour under their wings here. So while that's drying, I'm going to go back to this section and I'm going to put in some flicks of grass. So for that I'm going to have a thin brush, just a thin round brush. And I'm going to get my watercolours and this green here, or these two, I'm going to create some flicks in my grass. So just like this, just to give this area a little bit more life, just to say there's a little bit more going on here. There's long bits of grass amongst the flowers. You can use lots of different colours of green for this bit. You can use some dark. Just try and remember that if the grass is behind, it doesn't go on top of your flowers. Notice that as I get further up my hill, further away from my flowers, my blades of grass are going to start to get really teeny. And again, that will help make it look like it's getting further and further away. You could take that up as far as you like, but eventually you wouldn't see individual bits of grass. That's enough for me, and this is also a good opportunity to change anything you don't like. So I might make that leaf there a little bit darker. Maybe make that stem a bit darker. It's always good to leave patches of the colour that you painted before. Just poking through. Some of these leaves ended up being quite pale, so I quite like some of them to have some darker bits in. So I'm happy with that for now. I think I can probably safely go back to my birds now and do their faces. So for that, make sure you have a really, really clean brush. And then they have this kind of orangey, rusty red colour, but I'm going to go for quite a bright. So if your blue is still a bit wet, just try really hard not to touch it with your wet red paint. That means leaving a little white bit like I've done there, that's fine. You can go over their eyes because we can put those in with pen later on. And we've just got one more bit to do, and that is just the pale colour, which I'm going to use this kind of skin colour here. Just at the top underneath their wings. There we go. I think I'm done. So any other little details like their eyes and their beaks, I'm going to use my pen for, and I'm going to be going over all my flowers with pen as well. So I shall show you how to do that once your picture is dry. My picture is completely dry now, and that means I can get to the really fun bit of outlining with a black fine liner pen. Now you don't have to do this, but I love doing this because it just means I can find some of my shapes again. And when you outline something, you can always then put a little bit of the background. If you look really closely at these flowers here, you can see that when I've outlined them, I've actually put some of the background in there, and that actually adds something to the flowers. So you can do what you like, and you can put some shading in. So have fun and outline all the things that you did in your picture. And hopefully you will like the end results. So there's my finished drawing and painting of the swallows arriving, and I can do the exciting bit of taking off my tape. So well done, and I really hope you enjoyed doing your swallows arriving watercolour picture. You can share your pictures with us if you go to Artshed on Facebook. We'd love to see what you've done. And have a look at all our other projects because you might like those too.